After I had a flash marriage with my neighbor brother, I couldn't stand his indifference. So, in a fit of pique, I went to the bar to have some fun. Unexpectedly, that very night, I was tied up on the large, white European-style bed. The cold and ascetic man used his hands, which were used to holding surgical scalpels, to press my waist down little by little. 7 male models? Then you'd better not cry tonight. A few hours ago, I was having a great time in the bar. A few hours later, when I opened my eyes, I was completely dumbfounded. It seemed that I was tied up. My hands were bound. My eyes were blindfolded. And my body was so weak that I couldn't straighten up at all. Which bastard? Awake? Suddenly, a rather emotional's voice came from beside me. The phalanges on my thigh, like a midnight alarm bell, tapped regularly. The voice sounded a bit familiar. The ribbon was pulled off. I met a pair of strange and teasing eyes. Scott? This man was my cold-hearted husband. I was completely stunned. Why did you tie me up? Let me go. Before I could finish my words, my jaw was suddenly pinched by his rough fingertip. The voice in my ear was oppressive. Behave yourself. The cold wind blew in. As the car door was opened, my waist was lifted. Before I could figure out the situation, Scott picked me up around my waist. The sandalwood fragrance in the room brushed past my face. I could even feel which places I passed by. The entrance. The sofa. Straight to the bedroom. I was thrown onto the bed completely. Mia. Was it fun using my card to pick up wild men? Facing my nervousness, Scott had no expression on his face. The crystal chandelier hung high above, and the light it emitted made me lose my mind for a short while. Suddenly, I remembered the man who was working at the booth at that time. The light was dim and I couldn't see his face clearly, but his temperament was very familiar. At that time, I even joked with my best friend that it would be strange if it was Scott, because I believed that he would never come to such a place. But unexpectedly, it was really him. So, did he know everything about me being surrounded by male models at that time? Let me quibble. No, explain. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't plan to use your card. I took the wrong one. It was true. At that time, the light was dim, and I was busy talking to my best friend. Plus, the passwords of the cards were the same. I didn't know at all that I had swiped Scott's supplementary card. Scott had a half smile on his face. His calm and cold eyes behind the gold-rimmed glasses swept over my face menacingly. He probably didn't believe me. But think about it carefully. Was I at fault? No, my wrists were still tied. And the light made me extremely uncomfortable. Thinking about how cowardly I was, I simply became bold. Don't look at me like that. I just went out to have some fun. Besides, you are so busy with work every day. If you can't make me happy, can't I go out to find someone else? Scott's lips tightened. I thought I was completely right, originally. The marriage was a spur-of-the-moment thing. If you don't have this intention, then let's get a divorce. It's so boring. What is exciting? Suddenly, he pinched my face, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Is it exciting to play finger-grabbing with them? He really saw it. My face flushed, and I stuck out my neck. Yes, I like wild ones. I also imitated his ice-cold face and swept him back. Scott, we are not very suitable. You'd better just be my brother. Marrying Scott was originally an accident. I was so annoyed by my parents urging to get married that when my mother casually said to marry my neighbor brother, I agreed angrily. Unexpectedly, Scott also agreed. The next day, the two families happily let us go get the marriage certificate. We had been living together for more than half a year, but actually, I was a little afraid of him. When I was in middle school, he always disciplined me on behalf of my father. That was why I also disliked his indifferent appearance no matter what he did. Just like now, he stared at me expressionlessly without speaking. And even his eyebrows were cold and hard. Just when I thought he was going to call my parents. He went to the bathroom alone. He didn't even untie me. I was so angry that I desperately moved to the sofa, trying to get my phone to make a call. Just as I found where my bag was, the bathroom door opened. A large expanse of spring scenery came into view, and I couldn't help swallowing. Scott was so busy every day. Why was his figure still so good? The sound of footsteps on the floor magnified. I became nervous again. He was approaching. I protected my chest. If you force me, I won't let you off. But he smiled. We've been married for so long. Shouldn't I fulfill my duties as a husband? Scott said gently. And his slightly cold palm had already tightly grasped my wrist bone. I trembled with fear. I don't have the need. I do. Before I could react, he carried me to the bed. The fresh smell of body wash filled my nose, and I felt something churning in my mind. The man in front of me seemed to remember something, while his long, narrow black eyes narrowed slightly. His hands, which were used to holding surgical scalpels, pressed my waist down little by little. Were the 7 male models very exciting? The posture was too humiliating. I gritted my teeth. Yes. You. If you can't do it, I'll look down on you. In the past, Scott was the easiest to be angered. If he was angry, he would just leave. That would be the best. However, he just shrugged his shoulders, lazily chuckled, and leaned close to my ear. Really? Then don't cry tonight. My whole body tensed up. I never expected that, Scott. This bastard was so ruthless. I thought I was doomed tonight. But in the middle of it, his phone rang. He put water to my lips and, regardless of everything, answered the phone while still on top of me. I was still in a daze, and my eyes stayed on his receding figure for a while, recalling the note on the phone screen just now. Vivian, Scott's ex-girlfriend. I was the one who helped bring them together. The heat in my body dissipated, and I instantly understood the reason for Scott's coldness after marriage. When he was young, Scott was not such an aloof person. On the contrary, he was very wild and private, and there were countless girls around him. He turned over a new leaf when he met Vivian in college, and news of their being together was all the rage on the school's post bar at that time. He cut off all his romantic relationships overnight, and they were regarded as a beautiful couple of a handsome man and a beautiful woman. But later, Vivian went abroad and they broke up, and Scott's temperament changed drastically. Later, it seemed that I became the one who took over. Suddenly, I was very unhappy, especially when Scott came back from the balcony, got dressed, and only left a sentence, "I have something to do and need to go out." I didn't stop him, but slowly asked, "Has Vivian returned to the country?" He looked back at me, and the look in his eyes lost the lust that had been there just now. He pursed his lips and said, "Go to bed early tonight. I'll be back soon." The door was closed, and I suddenly came to my senses. Who wants you to come back? In a sense, the Rowan family and the Goof family were in a business-related marriage. I wasn't stupid enough to abandon my family's interests because of Vivian, but I also wouldn't allow myself to be at a disadvantage. The next day, I went to find Luna. Under her introduction, I found a very handsome male model and, by the way, posted a WeChat moments. Nightlife. Just beginning. Now I'm not afraid that Scott will tell my parents. After all, I also got his handle. As for Luna, seeing my actions and the hickey on my neck, she clicked her tongue. "Did you start something last night?" Luna also knew about my little affair with Scott. I didn't hide it from her. His ex-girlfriend is back. The white moonlight is so powerful that she could make him get off the bed and go out to find her. Luna exploded after hearing this. "This bastard is so cruel?" I shrugged. "It doesn't matter. Let him play his game, and I'll play mine. Anyway, we are just living together for convenience." I was very glad that I didn't fall for Scott. Otherwise, I would be the one getting hurt. For several days in a row. I didn't go home. On the second night, Scott called to ask where I was. Where could I be? I was having dinner with a young star right now. I'm with Ting Ting. I replied without blushing or my heart beating faster. Really? The voice on the other end of the phone didn't show any emotion. I didn't think much. Yes. He didn't say anything. I didn't care either and continued to talk with the guy opposite me. My clothing brand company now needed male models. And the guy opposite me owed me a favor, which he was just repaying today. After dinner, it was nearly 10 o'clock. However, today, many young couples were out on dates, and the passage was full of people. When I was walking down the stairs, someone bumped into me. Just as I was about to fall, a pair of hands appeared around my waist. I thought it was the young star, and was about to thank him, when I turned my head and saw that familiar handsome face. And I was stunned on the spot. Scott. Suddenly, a gentle voice came from behind me. I turned my head and saw someone I hadn't seen for a long time. Compared to when she was in college, Vivian looked a bit haggard. But her good temperament couldn't be hidden. The lotus pink dress she wore made her look like a rich girl. She trotted over. When she saw me, the smile on her face faded a little. I raised my eyebrows, pushed Scott away, and barely stood still. What a coincidence. Scott's eyes fell on the man behind me. And he sneered, "Ting Ting?" It sounded like an angry question. Before I could speak, Vivian said, "Mia. Long time no see. Is this your boyfriend?" Her eyes also fell on the young star. With a look of inquiry, I smiled and glanced at Scott leisurely. Since I didn't get an explanation, I simply took Zoe's arm. "Yes. Today, we are on a date. Are you on a date too?" Before Vivian could finish her words, Scott said in a deep voice, "It's a working day today." Of course. It's work. He didn't look very well. I didn't believe it. "You're a doctor. Do you still need to work outside?" I dragged Zoe and left. Scott called me with a cold face. And Vivian promptly pulled him back. She said something coquettious lied to him. I curled my lips. They really seemed deeply in love. Shameless. Away from those two scorching gazes, I immediately let go of Zoe's hand. "Sorry for using you. I'll treat you to dinner later." He was rather introverted and hadn't spoken throughout the whole process. Only then did I notice that his ears were completely red. He pursed his lips. His alluring eyes curved slightly. And he smiled at me. "It doesn't matter. Was that your boyfriend just now?" "That was my husband." A look of surprise appeared on his face. And I shrugged. "Yeah. It was really interesting. Scott was considered cheating, right? Maybe it would be useful for me in the future if we got divorced." Just as I was regretting not taking a photo, my phone rang. The voice on the phone was flustered. "Ms. Hong said that my grandma was in the hospital." At the same time, I also received a message from Scott. It was half an hour later when Scott and I arrived at the hospital. I rushed towards the ward. Just as I got out of the elevator, he grabbed my wrist. As if electrocuted, I immediately shook him off. But he held on even tighter. His voice cold and deep. "What? Can't a husband and wife even hold hands?" But thinking about the possibility that he might have been with Vivian a few hours ago, I felt disgusted. "A fake couple. I think your mother also hopes that we have a harmonious relationship." He interrupted me tactfully. At the end of the long corridor, Ms. Hong had already seen us. I pursed my lips tightly and finally put my hand on Scott's arm. Let him take advantage once. When we arrived, I quickly let go of his arm and looked towards the operating room. "Mom. How is Grandma?" She had a sudden myocardial infarction, and is still in the operation. After that, her eyes fell on Scott. And she said helplessly, "Originally, we wanted to go to Scott's hospital. But it was too far. So we chose a nearby one. My mother liked Scott very much. When we got married, she was the first to give her approval. It should be said that except for me, No one in my family disliked Scott. After a long time, the door of the operating room was slowly opened. The doctor said that she was out of danger. I also let out a sigh of relief. When it was time for the escort, my father also arrived. It's very late too. You and Scott go back first and come back tomorrow. I was a little hesitant. My mother took my hand and sighed. Your grandma is old and has been looking forward to having a great-grandchild. You and Scott have been married for half a year. Hurry up. My eyes widened. And my worried mood suddenly changed. Mom, Scott and I don't plan to. We will try our best. Mom. Suddenly, Scott held my hand and took over the conversation with a smile. I was dumbfounded. No, you still have someone in your heart. Yet you want to have a baby? When we got to the garage, I glared at him fiercely. If you want to have a baby, have it yourself. I won't accompany you. Then who will you accompany? That young puppy just now? Mia. Should we have a good talk? Scott's expression reminded me of the night when he tied me up. He was also like this. Gloomy. As if a storm was brewing. I was so angry that I laughed. Scott. You are a bit too double standard. You are allowed to still have feelings for your ex-girlfriend. But I'm not allowed to find someone else? I told you. It was work. His brows furrowed tightly, as if he was annoyed by my distress. I think he has given all his patience to Vivian, knowing that talking more was useless. I didn't want to be entangled. I'm going to Luna's place later. I won't go with you. Now not only his expression, but Scott's whole face turned cold. The second I took a step, his pitch-black pupils locked onto my back. He threatened, if you want me to call Mom, just go. I was so angry that my teeth itched. Still angry. When I got home, I kicked my shoes all over the place at the entrance. Scott closed the door of the villa, and then tidied up my shoes neatly. I snorted in disdain, a fussy surgeon. He looked up. And before I could react, he grabbed my wrist and suddenly pinned me against the entrance. And his lips kissed me. It was even more fierce and violent than before. My head was in a daze, and I couldn't exert any strength as I was trapped. I was forced to let him do whatever he wanted. I don't know how long it had been until the strength on my hands decreased. I could breathe, and was about to slap him when Scott put my hands on his neck. His pitch-black eyes were filled with lust and were slowly approaching me. In a hoarse voice, he said, "Are you jealous?" What? I hadn't fully recovered yet, and stared at the wrinkled shirt in front of me without speaking. Strange. He had been with Vivian. Why didn't he have her perfume smell on him? Speak. I really hated his tone. Thinking of something, I wiped my mouth hard. Furious. Are you dirty? You touched Vivian and then came to touch me. Somehow, I also felt a little aggrieved in my heart and was about to cry. Scumbag. I kicked him hard. The gaze above my head was burning. Scott laughed. When did I touch her? It was really just work. His fingertip gently stroked my side face, tucked the loose hair behind my ear, and looked at my red-rimmed eyes. Rarely, he gently explained. Originally, there was a lawyer having dinner with us too. But he had something to do and left temporarily. It was not just me and her. Mia. I'm not that immoral. I don't know if it was because the warm yellow light was too soft, but Scott seemed much gentler. Plus, the distance was too close, and I felt very unnatural. It was too hot. Even my cheeks were a little hot. I said oh and pushed him, but couldn't move him. I got impatient. But he held my hands on his chest together. Then what about you? What's the matter with that man just now? Zoe? I had an idea and finally regained some of my aura. My boyfriend. Didn't I say so? I just wanted Scott to realize that we were only in a business-related marriage. But his false possessiveness was still so strong. He took care of me when I was a child, and still wanted to control me when I grew up. He was out of control. Boyfriend? As expected. He laughed angrily. But the strength around my waist was even greater. The The pride on my face disappeared. Before I could react, I was carried to the bedroom around my waist. On weekdays, he rarely wore formal clothes. Even when he untied his tie, he exuded an ascetic charm. I was distracted for a while by his long and beautiful phalanges until my jaw was pinched. Mia. Then tell me. Who am I? Scott. Wrong. His brows furrowed slightly, and he regained his paranoid and domineering look. I immediately understood. TSK. I won't say those 2 words. But he seemed to see through my little thought and chuckled. It doesn't matter. You will shout it out later. The next day, I was woken up by a phone call. My assistant said that the information of the female models had been sent to my email. I stayed there for a while and found that Vivian had added me on WeChat. I was still wondering about her purpose, until I saw her message in the email. My eyes almost went black. So the model who came back from Milan was her? Sister Mia. I have read all aspects of the information, and currently it is very suitable for our brand. If you think it's okay, we can arrange an interview today. Maybe Vivian still didn't know that the person she was going to cooperate with next was me. After agreeing to be friends, her first greeting was, Mia. Thanks to you for bringing me and your brother Scott together back then. Could you tell me his recent situation? In other words, is he in a relationship? So, did she really not know that Scott was married? Also, in the industry, we were in a hidden marriage state. Except for the 2 families. No one knew. I heard that Vivian went to Milan for her career back then. And that was why they broke up. So this time she came back. Did she want to rekindle their old relationship? What a pity. He is married, I said directly. As for whether Vivian wanted to be a mistress, she had to weigh it herself. After last night, I had figured it out. If Scott was really tangled up with her, then I should think about getting a divorce. I, Mia, have never been bullied in my life. How could I let Vivian run wild over me? Vivian didn't reply to my message. When I saw her in the afternoon, as expected, her face was full of surprise. But at least she maintained her politeness and exchanged a few greetings. I guess that she might have sent someone to check Scott's marriage partner. But I don't know if she could find out it was me. The cooperation interview that lasted for a few hours went more smoothly than expected. If there are no accidents, be ready for the shooting tomorrow. I closed the file and reminded. Vivian was followed by an assistant. And most of the time it was she who was handling the communication. After it ended, Vivian walked out to make a phone call. But in the next second, I heard her happily say, Scott. I'm done here. Are you done over there? I was stunned for a moment and met her. Damn it. Does she really want to be a mistress? In the coffee shop, Luna was so angry when she heard my story that she slapped the table. No. What does she mean? Does she already know your relationship with Scott? It must be on purpose. I was also a little unhappy for no reason. By a woman's intuition, she probably regards me as her rival. Is she worthy? Luna was even angrier than me. Speaking of which, doesn't Scott have any sense of propriety? He is still chatting with his ex-girlfriend here and there. I recalled his words in bed last night. He meant that Vivian had some disputes in her life, and he was her only friend in China. So she asked him to help find a lawyer. Plus, she still had some health problems and needed treatment. Everything was for work needs. Nothing more. Can a man's words in bed be believed? Right now, the 2 of them might be having dinner somewhere. Besides, you 2 have no feelings. And this marriage will end sooner or later. Luna was outspoken. What she said was not without reason. Mia, are you sad? Why not call your ex-boyfriend back and take revenge on him? Isn't Ethan coming back to China? Ethan in her mouth was the person I pursued enthusiastically in college. But he went to study in the UK after graduating from college. I laughed. There's no need. I don't have feelings for Scott. I'm just a little unhappy. Unhappy with his behavior. Unhappy with Vivian's provocation towards me. Luna muttered. Being unhappy is a big problem. You used to not care at all. Isn't it all the same nature? I didn't think too much about it. I checked my assistant's work report progress and buried myself in work when I got home. Making money was the most important thing. As I wished. Scott worked overtime very late these days. Every night, when I fell asleep. I didn't even know when he entered the room. As a result, when I woke up the next day, I saw myself clinging to him like an octopus. And I was dumbfounded. And he didn't know when he had woken up and was propping himself up on the bed, looking at me leisurely. "Why did you sleep so soundly?" His eyes looked quite affectionate. I immediately woke up and quickly got up. "Let's sleep in separate rooms from now on." But he said casually, "I'm afraid it won't be appropriate if your mother knows. If Grandma knows, she will be even more sad." How would they know if you don't tell them?" He smiled and got out of bed without answering. As he moved, his collar slipped down, exposing a large area of his chest muscles. Before I could look away, he took off his top on his own and walked to the fitting room to find clothes. Thinking about the scene of burying my face in his chest just now, my face suddenly turned red. The action of slapping my face to cool down was just seen by him. And he looked confused. "Why? Do you think you've defooled me? You're so full of yourself." He just smiled without saying a word. But during the meal, he rarely reported his schedule. "I still have an operation this afternoon. If you have time after it ends, shall we go see Grandma together?" I wanted to refuse. But he continued, "When I was helping Vivian deal with things yesterday, I heard that she has become the exclusive model of your company. How is the cooperation? So concerned about his ex-girlfriend? Go ask her." "Why are you asking me?" Seeing my speechless look, Scott seemed to be in a better mood. I don't know what was wrong with him. He put the bread on my table and casually wiped the milk from the corner of my mouth with a tissue. Casually, he said, "It's not her that I'm concerned about." I paused, looking down at his hand still by my lips. My heart beat a little faster. What was going on? Why was Scott so strange these days? He was simply making me at a loss. "Oh. Then what does it have to do with me? I'm full. You can eat slowly by yourself." I took my plate and left. The pace of my escape was a flustered that I wasn't even aware of myself. And I had no idea at all that behind me, Scott was smiling helplessly. I was sure that Vivian knew that I was Scott's wife. During the shooting, she didn't ask me about Scott anymore. Instead, she took the initiative to show all kinds of things between her and him in college. And in doubt of her words, she was saying that they had been in love. She was referring to the fact that most of the marriages in wealthy families were just for show and there was no true love. It was true that there was no true love. But what did it have to do with her? I was so speechless that my professional forced me not to roll my eyes. But privately, I ate 3 bowls of rice and finally had chest pain in the middle of the night. I suspected that I had a breast lump, so I hurried to the hospital. Recently, I had been deliberately keeping a distance from Scott. When the nurse said that he still had examinations to do, I heaved a great sigh of relief. However, a few minutes later, when I saw the man in a white coat and a blue mask coming in, I was stunned. "No, didn't Scott say he was busy? You can go out. I'll do it for her." His voice was cold, and he had a businesslike expression on his face. I subconsciously stepped back. He chuckled. "What are you afraid of?" "Who's afraid?" I stuck out my neck. But the second my clothes were lifted, I was still nervous. Scott laughed again, without any concealment, and his voice became gentle. "Relax, Mia. It's not like I haven't seen it before." My heart was inexplicably a little flustered. Scott bluntly pointed out, "Why is your heart beating so fast?" Now my face was all hot, and I avoided his gaze and urged, "Hurry up. It can't be rushed." He was so slow. Finally, when I thought I was about to suffocate, he took off his gloves and helped me put on my clothes. He raised his chin towards the door, Go outside and wait for the results. When the color Doppler ultrasound results came out, it showed breast nodules. I was shocked. The nurse smiled reassuringly. It's okay. It's common among young people nowadays. At this level, there's no need for surgery. Just be less angry usually and come for regular checkups. I was in a daze. No, I wasn't angry. A nurse shook the report again, as if to say that the data couldn't be false. When I was leaving the hospital, Scott sent a message saying that he asked me to wait for him in his office for a few minutes and we would leave together later. I wanted to refuse. But he added, Grandma should want us to visit her together. Damn it. For some reason, I always felt being manipulated. Fortunately, I didn't have to wait too long. Soon, Scott in casual clothes came out. But as it happened, when we were going out, we met Vivian coming towards us. She was still holding a thermos cup in her hand. When she saw Scott, she waved her hand with a big smile on her face. I simply raised my hand too. Hi. The smile on Vivian's face froze instantly. Why don't you two catch up? I was very virtuous and was about to give up my place voluntarily. But Scott took my hand and added the introduction that was missed last time. Vivian. This is Mia. My wife. After a pause, he looked at the thermos cup in her hand and reminded, in the future, please don't do anything that will make her misunderstand again. She will be unhappy. Which eye of yours saw that I was unhappy? I pinched his metacarpal bone. He raised his eyebrows and looked at my report. Why did you come to the hospital? I'm not angry. They are not worth my anger at all. I was very speechless. In Vivian's eyes, we were flirting. Her face suddenly turned pale, and she asked with red eyes, don't you two have no feelings? Yes. Who said there were no feelings? Scott glared at me gloomily, dissatisfied. But before Vivian could say anything more, he was impatient. I've already repaid the favor I owed you. Goodbye. Then he dragged me out. His action was so straightforward that I suspected that if I didn't leave, he would carry me horizontally. I was still a little dazed until we got to the garage. Well, are they just over like this? What was Scott up to? Are you stupid? Scott raised his hand and waved it in front of my eyes. I was indeed stupid. Didn't you want to get back together with her? What get back together? No. Didn't she come back to the country to get back together with you? He seemed shocked by my statement. What are you thinking about every day? We were never together. How could we get back together? After that, seeing that I still didn't move, he leaned over on his own to fasten my seatbelt. The remaining smell of disinfectant wafted over, and I held my breath. What was going on? It's not like we haven't had contact before. Why did my heart beat faster every time because of Scott's unintentional little actions? So spineless. I secretly despised myself. But I also recalled Scott's words just now. So, he wasn't with Vivian? Then when I helped them get together, why did Vivian say they were together? All the way, I was absent-minded. It was not until we got to the hospital and the old lady woke up and subtly urged us to have a baby again that I finally reacted and smiled awkwardly. Grandma. I'm focusing on my career now. There's no hurry. You're almost 26. And Scott is almost 30. How can there be no hurry? She was a little angry. The most important thing was that our relationship was still unstable. Who knew when Scott and I would break up? Having a baby at this time was not a wise choice. Feeling irritable, Scott took the opportunity when Grandma was taking her medicine and leaned close to my ear. If you don't want to have a baby, it doesn't matter. Just promise them first to give Grandma some peace of mind. The sudden closeness made my heart skip a beat. When our eyes met, I felt uncomfortable all over. Oh, I know. Why did he get so close? He seemed to be amused and blatantly rubbed my head, making Grandma very happy. Scott was very good at taking care of the elders' preferences, which was why I could leave the hospital safely. After coming out, he still didn't forget to laugh at me. Where has your fearless spirit gone? This is different. I pouted. I hated dealing with these messy things the most. He also knew. It doesn't matter. Leave it to me in the future. Before he could finish his words, my phone rang. When I answered it, Luna on the other end of the phone said in a flustered manner, "Ethan is back." The late night was too quiet. Even without the speaker on, the voice was very loud. Scott looked over when he heard it. The curve of the corner of his mouth dropped a few degrees. And he asked unhappily, "Is he the person you chased for 2 years in college?" Come to think of it, Scott was not only my neighbor brother but also my senior. In college, his affair with Vivian was widely known. And my pursuit of Ethan was also known to everyone. But who could have thought? When I thought I was going to be with Ethan, he left the country without a word. In the same year, Vivian also left the country. It seemed that Scott and I were somewhat in the same boat. So that night, I was quite accommodating to him. But I don't know what got into him. His actions became more and more fierce. I cursed once, and he responded 10 times, making me completely defeated. Finally, he bit my ear viciously. "I don't know what's so good about Ethan that made you endure not dating for so many years." What was he talking about? Crazy. On Saturday, to celebrate Ethan's return to China, everyone had a dinner party in a certain restaurant in the city center. When I arrived, I realized that it was near Scott's hospital. Half an hour later, everyone gradually arrived. Only the main character, Ethan, was late. The door was slowly opened 1 minute before the dinner party ended. Ethan, whom we hadn't seen for a long time, slowly appeared in everyone's sight. However, he was still holding a bouquet of tulips in his hand. When everyone saw this, they all rushed forward. I heard that Ethan had maximized the business territory of his branch company abroad in recent years. And his purpose of returning to China now was to inherit the family business. A young and powerful boss, who was also an old classmate. Everyone couldn't wait to fawn on him. Only Luna had a very novel focus and whispered in my ear in confusion, "What's the situation? Aren't those your favorite flowers?" The tulips in Ethan's hand were out of place with all the luxury in the private room. After not seeing him for a long time, he had lost some of his coldness when he was young and instead had a bit of coldness in the business world. His hair was neatly combed back. He was wearing an elegant suit. And he had a proper smile in the workplace. While I was looking at him, he had already slowly walked over. Suddenly, he leaned over and hugged me. "Long time no see, Mia." I was completely stunned. I was even more breathless from his hug. "You." But I saw that his eyes were red. I was instantly dumbfounded. "What the hell? Your favorite tulips. I brought them especially for you." Ethan bent his eyebrows and smiled at me, as if what had just happened was just an illusion. And just then, someone in the private room released streamers. "Welcome Ethan back to China" with enthusiasm. The noisy voices rose one after another, breaking the awkward atmosphere. I quickly escaped and walked to Luna. The monitor said, "Hey, Mia, there's a seat next to Ethan. Come and sit here." The next second, he occupied the seat next to me. Ethan said very few words throughout the whole process. From time to time, he picked up braised pork for me, and his eyes were full of affection. My heart skipped a beat, and I finally understood what this meant. Did he want to rekindle the old relationship? No. What relationship? Thank you. But I don't like braised pork anymore. I refused politely. Luna also understood and immediately chimed in. Yes. Braised pork is too greasy. Mia likes sweet and sour pork tenderloin now. It doesn't matter. Just ask someone to make it. Mia can have whatever she likes. Ethan seemed not to understand the hidden meaning and leaned closer to my ear, looking even more gentle. Even his way of addressing me had changed. Everyone whistled and joked. Oh, President Shaw is really partial. Why are you only taking care of one person? Yeah. We're jealous. Huh. Ethan generously replied. You can have it too. Just tell the waiter what you want to eat. Throughout the whole process, Ethan took care of me. Gradually, I became impatient and was about to be frank with him. Suddenly, the door was pushed open from the outside. The staff in uniforms quickly laid out the red carpet. Then they respectfully lined up on both sides. 999 Ecuadorian roses and the character Mayan made of gold came clearly into view. At some point in the private room, a soothing piano piece started to play, making the atmosphere harmonious. Someone pushed me forward. Mia. This is the main purpose of President Xia's return to China. He wants to confess his love to you. Only then did I realize that except for Luna and me, everyone knew about this. The tulips in Ethan's hand were replaced with another bouquet, which was made entirely of gold. He was pushed forward by everyone and scratched his head shyly. Mia. In college. Actually, I wanted to accept your confession. But unfortunately I had to go abroad for treatment. It has been delayed for so many years. And I haven't said a word to you all this time. Speaking of this, a faint blush appeared on his face. And his voice was a little nervous. Mia. I like you. I wonder if your feelings have changed. The cedar scent on Ethan and the fragrance of roses slowly drifted into my nose as he was too close. Everyone in the hall had an expectant look. And my sight, through the layers of people, met Scott's eyes. I don't know how long he had been there. He still hadn't changed out of his white coat. The dim light mixed with the thick night was cast on the outline of his side face, making him look a little cold. Is Mia shy? The classmates were whispering and discussing. Back then, she chased President Xia so vigorously that not even 9 bulls could pull her back. Now that she has finally got what she wanted, it's normal to be shy. I saw Scott's mouth twitch slightly. Suddenly, I felt a bit guilty. A guilt that I had never felt even when being caught before. Even the wall that I had always thought was strong was quietly crumbling. I'm married. Ethan. After a long while, when reason prevailed, I finally raised my hand. All eyes were focused on the ring on my hand. Under everyone's astonished expressions, I slowly walked towards Scott. I affectionately took his arm and introduced to them. Let me introduce my marriage partner. Scott. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. The joy on Ethan's face disappeared. And he stared at Scott's face for a long time, as if remembering something. He frowned. Is he your childhood sweetheart? Hello. I'm Mia's husband. Scott seemed to be very pleased. And the gloom on his face disappeared instantly. He raised his eyebrows and stretched out his hand. You are Mia's classmates, right? Speaking of which, we haven't had a wedding yet. At that time, I hope you all can come. Scott had a proper smile on his face as he looked around. He took my hand and intertwined our fingers, like a couple with deep affection. Then he looked at the roses around and asked knowingly, is someone here confessing their love? Everyone in the room looked down and no one dared to speak. But Luna joked, yes. Cherish your wife, or she will be snatched away. Are you trying to steal my wife? Hasn't she been stolen yet? He then whispered in my ear. Can't you be a little more crisis aware? I was speechless and took the initiative to propose. Since the party is over, everyone should go back to their own homes. I came from the crowd. Later, everyone scattered like birds and beasts. Before leaving, when passing by Ethan, Scott paused slightly and glanced sideways. Ethan? President Xia. Right? The interested expression disappeared, and his tone became a bit more oppressive. 5 years have passed. No one will always stay in the past. What do you think? Now. His pretense of playing dumb to prey on the strong was completely gone. The color on Ethan's face visibly faded. Such a farce ended just like that. Scott, who had been so good-tempered just now, gave me a sullen look. Mia, have you forgotten that we are already married? I felt guilty again under his gaze. How could I know he would suddenly do this? Besides, I didn't say anything about you and Vivian before. What about me and her? If it weren't for cutting off those annoying admirers in college, I simply asked her for help and owed her a favor. I have no contact with her long ago. But you got sick several times when chasing Ethan before. Are you still in love with him? How did he know that I got sick several times? No. Were you really not with Vivian? He used to be such a playboy. Could he really be into pure love? So, you've never been in a relationship, Scott? He gave me a faint look. Have you? No. Scott seemed determined to get an answer. Do you still like him? Ethan? How could I? 5 years have passed. What about me? Huh? With the neon lights flashing, Scott moved a little closer. Do you like me? What? Scott likes you? Late at night, Scott suddenly had an operation and had to go back to the hospital, leaving me alone at home, unable to fall asleep after tossing and turning. I could only turn to Luna for help. He asked me if I liked him, and said that he had never been in a relationship with Vivian at all. Luna was as shocked as I was. After being silent for a long time, she finally spoke. Then what? What did you say? Before I could say anything, he was called away by the hospital. Then do you like him? No. Didn't you wish to divorce him? I touched my nose guiltily. I used to think so. But now it seems that something has changed a little. Luna saw through my thoughts at a glance and clicked her tongue. So amazing? He could even make you fall for him in bed. What are you talking about? Only then did she seriously analyze. But to be honest, I think since you two got married, there must be some fate. Childhood sweethearts. Right? Maybe that guy Scott has been thinking about you for a long time without you knowing. Yes. I thought about it carefully again. Scott had never been in a relationship. But he readily agreed to a flash marriage with me. What else could this be if not having some little thoughts? Stop thinking. He just likes you. Luna made the final declaration. So that I spent the whole night in a sweet dream. The next day when I woke up, the room was empty. Scott sent a message saying that he had slept in the hospital all night. The next second, I found that my contacts list was exploding. This was the first time I realized the power of public opinion. It was also the first time I realized that someone could be so crazy for a man. As a model, Vivian spread the rumor online under her real name that our company's designer was plagiarizing. Now, netizens followed suit to condemn. And the company's phone was being bombarded. Sister Mia. What should we do now? My assistant said anxiously on the phone. I read through Vivian's statements one by one and clicked my tongue. Contact the legal department after the internal audit is completed. By the way, call the designer in for an interview. There are countless design works. Vivian could find similarities. Indeed. Her purpose was obvious. It was nothing more than dissatisfaction and revenge. She took the initiative to come to terminate the contract. I smiled. Miss Wrong. Are you so sure that my designer plagiarized? There are pictures as evidence. Netizens have discerning eyes. Do you still want to quibble? I carefully examined the similar pictures she found and chuckled. Let me remind you that spreading rumors is illegal. Who is spreading rumors? She snorted without any guilt and directly hung up the phone. The next day, there were also press releases saying that I was a third party who had broken into someone else's relationship. The public opinion was even more fierce. And even netizens were so angry that they sent private messages to curse and cyberbully me. When Scott called, I was on my way back to my hometown. In his words, he was full of worry and asked me if I wanted him to solve it. I shook my head. I've already thought of a way. Coincidentally, the original version of the design drawing that Vivian found was drawn by me. It will be reversed soon. Let the bullet fly for a while. Anyway, the new products are about to be launched recently. Take this opportunity to increase the popularity. On the third day, when Vivian stopped causing trouble, I asked the public relations department to issue a statement, and attached a manuscript I drew in college. Almost as soon as my original design draft was sent out and compared with the draft pointed out by Vivian, everyone knew that she had made a similar copy before sending out her picture. This was what created the illusion of plagiarism. The public opinion reversed. During this period, Ethan called me. He gently asked about my specific situation. But I still didn't miss the caution in his words. To be honest, although I had no more interaction with him, I was very disappointed in him. When the designer was short of inspiration, I just put my ideas on her. In fact, I had forgotten that I had made a similar design before. And this picture, I had never posted it on the internet. The only one who knew was Ethan. It seemed that my silence made Ethan panic. And he subconsciously said, I admit that I took the initiative to approach Vivian. But I just wanted her to pay the price for bullying you. I also wanted you to recall your college days. Clearly, you used to only have me in your eyes. His voice was full of stubbornness. And I suddenly felt helpless. Ethan, people have to move forward. Then why? After going around, are you still with Scott? You clearly used to hate him very much. Is it because he knew he liked you that you reluctantly agreed to marry him? No. Just as I was about to speak, he mocked himself. Also, congratulations to him for finally getting what he wanted. It's my fault that I only wanted to be successful in my career before coming back to give you a proper explanation. Little did I know that it was already too late. Tell me, if you weren't married yet, would I still have a chance? Finally getting what he wanted. I smiled. Sure enough, Scott liked me. When reading romance novels before, the most impressive sentence was, run when going to see the person you like. At this moment, I could finally understand the heroine's mood. It was surging and exciting. The thermos box in my hand bumped against my arm and left a bruise. But I didn't feel any pain. Stopping at the entrance of the hospital, the paper bag in my hand was already soaked. Maybe it was because of my panting appearance. Or maybe it was because during the peak of the public opinion, I posted my marriage certificate with Scott online, which dispelled everyone's doubts about me being a third party who breaks into a relationship. At this moment, a passing nurse suddenly blocked in front of me. Mrs. Gu. Drive. Gu is currently facing a dispute. Please wait here. What did that mean? Suddenly, a commotion came from ahead. A stainless steel cup rolled all the way to my feet from 2 meters away. Didn't you say you could save him? Why did it still fail? The hysterical voice quickly made me realize that this was a medical dispute. Scott had told me before that it was normal for family members to be emotionally agitated when an operation failed. And in severe cases, it could cause problems, just like this medical dispute now. But I didn't expect that someone would be crazy enough to take out a knife. The cold light flashed into my eyes. And my heart tightened. It's all your fault. How dare you still be a doctor? Go to hell. A rough and deep male voice rang out. And it was too crowded ahead to see who he was attacking. Until everyone was so frightened that they stepped back. And a familiar and handsome face came into view. And in the next second, the knife handle hit the ground with a crisp sound. And when the knife was pulled out, a few drops of blood splashed on the sleeve of the white coat. Scott had been stabbed in the waist and abdomen. I was so frightened that the thermos box in my hand dropped to the ground with a clatter. And I rushed forward hurriedly. Seeing me, Scott's usually calm face finally showed a trace of change. Why are you here? Finally. I couldn't hold back the redness in my eyes. How are you? Call the police. Send Drive. Gu to get bandaged quickly. Someone in the crowd directed. When the nurse was about to come in to bandage, Scott refused. I can do it myself. Doesn't it hurt? You still have the mood to smile. I scolded him. The corner of his mouth curved again. And only when the wound was completely bandaged did his face change a little. Don't move. I'll help you. I bent down carefully, lifted his clothes. And the more I looked at the hideous wound, the more sour my nose became. Don't be afraid. He was just venting. He didn't dare to hurt the vital parts. My earlobe was gently pinched as Scott explained casually. I wanted to scold him again, but seeing the cold sweat on his forehead, I couldn't bear to. If everyone wants to stab you, will you just let them? I couldn't help scolding him. Why was this scheming person so indulgent when facing such an extreme situation? Scott took in my worried look and suddenly smiled. He put his arm around my waist and kissed the corner of my mouth. Don't worry. It's only this once. So, Mia, is there a possibility that you have fallen in love with me a little? He pinched my soft waist side as if absent-mindedly. From above, I rarely saw an expectant expression on his face. I couldn't help but think of what Ethan said. Before going abroad, Scott had someone beat him up. If he didn't like me, why did he keep me hanging? Otherwise, he would have confessed long ago. I asked him smugly, have you been secretly in love with me since childhood? Only a brief look of shock flashed across Scott's face. And soon he raised his eyebrows and was straightforward. What's wrong with being secretly in love since childhood? I laughed out loud on purpose to scare him. You're doomed. Scott. I've caught you. He wasn't annoyed either. And indeed changed his words with a certain look. Yes. I'm doomed. I still owe you a wedding. In a season of beautiful spring, Scott and I held our wedding in Ireland. I participated in all the designs. Except for the video under the arch bridge. It was Scott at different ages talking to himself. The 17-year-old boy in a blue and white school uniform was still quite calm when facing the camera. He said, I asked Mia today which school she was going to apply for. She said Nanjing University. Well, it was indeed within my expectation. I will be her schoolmate for another 4 years. Scott at 18. Still full of a boyish look. Mia asked me why I was so obsessed with being a doctor. When she was a child, she had a car accident and forgot a part of her memory. She even forgot the brother she was closest to. In the sea of flowers all over the mountains and plains, there was a rare sight caught coming against the light. Even in the middle of the bouquet, there was a heart made of diamonds. Many pictures flashed in between. All of me taken by Scott. It seemed like a century had passed. And then the picture changed to Scott in a suit and tie. Just like what he was wearing today. He said, marrying you was something I decided on many years ago. My childhood nickname, when spoken by him, was murmured affectionately. The tears in my eyes were. The MC choked a little. And even following the script, he couldn't hide his excited tone. When receiving the ring, Scott's hand was shaking. But he pretended to be relaxed on his face. You used to always ask me what my favorite sentence was. Actually, Chinese characters are profound. But I still hope constant thoughts will surely be answered. Please give me more advice in the future. Mrs. Gu. The snow-capped mountains in the distance emitted a soft golden light. And the clouds were drifting. In this world in the picture, it seemed that only we were looking at each other. His eyes were so passionate and gentle. So I wiped away my tears, stood on tiptoe, and returned his surging love. I love you, Scott.